Understanding the nature of the mind has been a profound quest for philosophers, scientists, and thinkers throughout human history. Conventional materialism, often referred to as physicalism, is one of the prevailing philosophies that seeks to shed light on this age-old question. In the world of ideas and debates, it stands as a prominent framework that asserts that the mind, with all its intricacies of thought, emotion, and consciousness, can be entirely explained by the physical world. This means that, according to materialism, the brain serves as the seat of the mind, and mental phenomena are products of physical causes and effects. In this discussion, we'll delve into the core principles of material conventionalism, exploring its reductionist approach, the idea that the brain is the epicenter of mental activity, and the concept of causation as it relates to the mind. We'll also highlight the challenges materialism faces, particularly the hard question of consciousness, and the subjective nature of our inner experiences. To provide a comprehensive understanding, we'll touch upon alternative views and approaches that have emerged in response to these challenges. Join me on this intellectual journey as we navigate the landscape of conventional materialism and its views on the mind, seeking clarity in the complex relationship between the physical and the mental. Howdy, I'm just some random nude dude sitting in my closet talking to myself. It's also where I celebrate the power of free thinking and encourage bold ideas. As a society, we're often afraid to challenge the norms and think outside the box. But here, I embrace the unconventional. So sit back, relax, and join me on this journey of exploration, where we embrace our inner nude dude and push boundaries to discover new perspectives. Throughout the annals of human history, the nature of the mind has beckoned philosophers, scientists, and seekers of knowledge to venture into the labyrinthine realms of consciousness and cognition. Conventional materialism, often referred to as physicalism, stands as a luminous beacon in the intellectual landscape, a philosophy that seeks to unravel the mysteries of the mind by grounding it firmly in the physical world. Within the realms of ideas and philosophical discourse, materialism asserts that the mind, with its intricate tapestry of thoughts, emotions, and self-awareness, can be wholly explicated by the physical universe. This proposition posits that the brain, with its biological intricacies, acts as the very crucible of the mind, and that the mental phenomena are the products of intricate physical causes and effects. In this discussion, we embark on a journey of understanding, peeling back the layers of conventional materialism and its views on the mind. We delve deep into the core tenets that underpin this philosophy, including the principles of reductionism, which seeks to demystify complex mental phenomena by breaking them down into their fundamental physical constituents. Our exploration also leads us to the idea that the brain serves as the very locus of the mind, an idea which is supported by evidence from neuroscience. Furthermore, we'll unravel the concept of causation within materialism, which posits that all mental events can be traced back to physical causes, dispelling the need for non-physical or supernatural explanations. The empirical methods of science, as well as the intricacies of the brain, play vital roles in this causal web. However, as we navigate the landscape of conventional materialism, we encounter challenges and philosophical debates. The hard question of consciousness, brought to the forefront by philosopher David Chalmers, confronts us with the profound question of how and why physical processes in the brain give rise to our subjective, conscious experiences. This conundrum forces us to confront the limits of materialism in explaining the inner workings of the mind. Materialism, by nature, struggles to account for the ineffable qualities of experiences, the unique flavors of subjectivity, and the very what's it like of consciousness, known as qualia. It also wrestles with the implications of a deterministic worldview, which suggests that personal agency and free will may be mere illusions. In response to these challenges, alternative philosophical perspectives such as dualism, panpsychism, and idealism have emerged, each offering different vantage points on the mind-brain relationship. As we embark on this intellectual journey, we aim to uncover the nuanced intricacies of conventional materialism's view of the mind, while acknowledging the ongoing debates in the allure of alternative viewpoints. The journey invites us to contemplate the deep and enduring mystery of consciousness and the ceaseless pursuit of understanding this enigma that resides within each of us. But what is conventional materialism? Conventional materialism, often referred to as physicalism, is a philosophical stance that focuses on the idea that everything, including the mind, can be explained through physical matter and natural processes. In the context of the mind, this view asserts that mental processes, thoughts, and consciousness are fundamentally rooted in the physical brain and its interactions. Conventional materialism is a philosophical worldview that seeks to explain the nature of reality, including the mind, in terms of the physical world. It posits that everything that exists, including mental phenomena, can be ultimately understood and explained by the fundamental principles of physics and the natural sciences. Materialists contend that there is no need for supernatural or non-physical entities to explain the world. They assert that the physical universe, composed of atoms, molecules, and the laws of physics, is a foundation for all existence. Materialism adheres to a monist perspective, which means that it believes in a single, unified reality. In this case, the reality is entirely physical. There's no separate realm of the mind or consciousness. They are considered products of physical processes. Reductionism is a central idea in materialism. It suggests that complex phenomena such as thoughts, emotions, and consciousness can be reduced to simpler components at the level of the physical particles, neural networks, and biochemical interactions. In other words, everything about the mind can be broken down into the behavior of physical constituents. Materialism places a strong emphasis on empirical evidence and the scientific method. It seeks to understand and explain the mind through observable, measurable, and testable physical processes. This involves a reliance on disciplines like neuroscience, psychology, and biology. Materialists argue that the brain is the epicenter of all mental activity. Every thought, sensation, and emotion can be traced back to neural processes within the brain. When certain parts of the brain are damaged or stimulated, it can result in changes in mental functioning, providing evidence for the physical basis of the mind. Materialism asserts that mental events are caused by physical processes. For example, emotions are believed to be the result of chemical reactions and electrical impulses in the brain. This perspective removes the need for non-physical or supernatural explanations for mental phenomena. Materialism aligns with a naturalistic worldview, meaning it doesn't invoke supernatural or metaphysical explanations. It holds that the laws of nature, as understood by science, can account for all phenomena, including those related to the mind. While conventional materialism offers a compelling framework for understanding the mind, it faces challenges, particularly in addressing the subjective aspects of consciousness and the hard problem of consciousness. This problem, as outlined by philosopher David Chalmers, questions how physical processes give rise to our subjective experiences. Conventional materialism is a philosophical stance that sees the physical world as the ultimate foundation of all reality, including the mind. It relies on reductionism and the empirical methods of science to explain mental phenomena. Despite its strengths, it encounters difficulties in explaining the nature of consciousness and the subjective aspects of our inner experiences, which remain topics of ongoing debate in philosophy and neuroscience. One of the key aspects of materialism is reductionism. Reductionists argue that mental phenomena can be reduced to or fully explained by the interactions of physical particles and brain activities. In other words, they believe that the complex workings of the mind can be broken down into simpler physical components. Reductionism is a fundamental concept within conventional materialism or physicalism. It's the idea that complex phenomena such as mental processes can be reduced to or explained by simpler and more fundamental components. In the context of the mind, reductionism posits that the intricate workings of consciousness, thoughts, and emotions can ultimately be broken down into basic physical elements such as atoms, molecules, neurons, and the interactions between them. This form of reductionism suggests that everything, including the mind, has an underlying physical basis. In other words, all mental phenomena are ultimately composed of physical entities and processes. This implies that there are no non-physical substances or entities involved in mental events. Theoretical reductionism focuses on the idea that complex theories and explanations about the mind can be reduced to simpler, more fundamental scientific theories. For example, theories in psychology can be reduced to theories in neuroscience and ultimately to the principles of physics. This level of reductionism involves the practice of studying complex phenomena by analyzing and understanding their constituent parts. In the context of the mind, it means that mental processes are investigated by examining the underlying neural and physical processes of the brain. Reductionism is evident in the field of neuroscience, where researchers attempt to explain cognitive processes by examining the behavior of neurons, synapses, and brain regions. For example, memory and learning are studied by understanding how neurons form connections to store information. At an even more fundamental level, reductionism is evident in molecular biology. Researchers study the genetic and biochemical processes that underlie mental health conditions and behaviors. For example, the genetic basis of certain mental disorders is explored through an analysis of specific genes and their interactions. Reductionism is applied to cognitive psychology, which breaks down mental processes like problem-solving, memory, and perception into smaller, more manageable components. This approach allows psychologists to investigate the underlying mechanism of complex mental functions. While reductionism is a powerful tool for understanding the physical basis of the mind, it also faces criticism. Some argue that it may oversimplify complex phenomena and overlook the emergent properties that arise from intricacies between simpler elements. For instance, the experience of consciousness may be more than the sum of its neural parts, leading to what philosopher David Chalmers calls the hard problem of consciousness. Reductionism in conventional materialism is the idea that complex mental phenomena can be understood by breaking them down into simpler physical components. It operates at various levels, from analyzing the brain's neural processes to examining the underlying biology and physics. While reductionism has been a valuable approach to understanding the mind, it's not without its challenges, particularly when dealing with the subjective aspects of consciousness and the emergence of higher-order properties. Materialists argue that the brain is the epicenter of all mental activity. They point to evidence from neuroscience, such as the correlation between brain damage and changes in cognitive function, to support this view. When certain parts of the brain are damaged, specific mental functions can be impaired, which is seen as strong evidence for the physical basis of the mind. In conventional materialism, the idea that the brain serves as the seat of the mind is a foundational concept. It posits that all mental processes, thoughts, emotions, and consciousness itself are fundamentally rooted in the physical structure and activities of the brain. Here's a more detailed look at this notion. Materialists argue that there is a distinct and causal relationship between the physical brain and mental phenomena. When you experience thoughts, emotions, or perceptions, these are believed to be the result of electrochemical processes within the brain. For instance, the firing of neurons and the release of neurotransmitters play a critical role in generating mental experiences. The brain isn't seen as a uniform entity responsible for the entirety of mental activity. Instead, it's considered to have various regions, each with specialized functions. For example, the frontal lobes are associated with decision-making and executive functions, while the temporal lobes are involved in memory and auditory processing. Damage to specific brain areas can result in corresponding changes in cognitive and emotional functioning, which materialists see as evidence for the brain-mind connection. An important aspect of the brain-mind relationship is its adaptability or plasticity. The brain can reorganize itself in response to experiences, learning, and even injuries. This phenomenon is often cited as evidence that the brain is responsible for cognitive functions. For instance, after a stroke, the brain can sometimes rewire itself to compensate for damaged areas, leading to functional recovery. Materialists rely on empirical evidence from neuroscience to support the idea that the brain is the physical seat of the mind. Advanced imaging techniques like functional MRIs or PET scans have provided insights into the correlations between brain activity and mental states. Observations of brain lesions and their effects on cognitive functions further reinforce the connection between the brain and the mind. While the concept of the brain as the seat of the mind is a central tenet of materialism, it's not without its challenges. One of the most significant challenges is the question of how physical processes in the brain give rise to subjective consciousness. This is often referred to as the hard question of consciousness, as posed by philosopher David Chalmers. It questions how the electrochemical activity in the brain can generate the rich tapestry of our inner experiences. Conventional materialism asserts that the brain is the seat of the mind, and all mental phenomena can be explained through the physical processes of the brain. This perspective relies on scientific evidence, brain localization of functions, and the adaptability of the brain. However, it faces philosophical debates regarding the nature of consciousness and how it emerges from the physical workings of the brain. Materialists propose that mental events are products of physical causes and effects. For instance, emotions like happiness or sadness can be attributed to the release of specific neurotransmitters in the brain. They argue that there's no need to invoke non-physical entities or forces to explain mental phenomena. In the framework of conventional materialism, causation plays a crucial role in explaining how mental events are related to physical processes, particularly in the brain. This concept asserts that all mental events have physical causes and effects, and there is no need to invoke non-physical or supernatural explanations. Here's a deeper look at causation within materialism. Materialists argue that all mental phenomena, such as thoughts, emotions, and consciousness, are the result of specific physical processes in the brain. For example, when you experience happiness, it's seen as a consequence of specific neurotransmitters, like serotonin and dopamine, being released and acting on the brain receptors. This chemical process is the cause of the emotional state. Causation within materialism is closely tied to its reductionist approach. Reductionism seeks to break down complex mental processes into simpler physical components. This allows for the identification of specific causal relationships at the neuronal or biochemical levels. For instance, memory can be explained by changes in synaptic connections and neural firing patterns. Materialists rely on empirical evidence and scientific methods to support their claims regarding causation. Through experiments and observations in fields like neuroscience and psychology, they aim to establish causal relationships between brain activity and mental states. When a particular brain region is stimulated or damaged, leading to changes in mental functions, it's taken as evidence for causation. Causation within materialism often implies a deterministic perspective, where all mental events have a direct physical cause. In this view, mental processes are entirely governed by physical laws and prior states of the physical system. This view is sometimes criticized for not leaving room for free will. Understanding the causal relationship between brain activity and mental states has a practical implication. It forms the basis for interventions and treatments in areas like psychiatry and neurology. For example, medications that alter neurotransmitter levels can be used to treat mood disorders. While causation is a fundamental aspect of materialism, it faces challenges and debates, especially in relation to the subjective nature of consciousness. The hard problem of consciousness questions how purely physical processes in the brain give rise to the subjective qualities of experience. It's a challenge that materialism continues to grapple with, and some argue that a full account of consciousness may require a broader perspective. Causation in conventional materialism asserts that mental events are products of physical causes and effects within the brain. It relies on a reductionist approach and empirical evidence to establish these causal relationships. However, it encounters challenges, particularly in addressing the nature of consciousness and the subjective aspects of mental experience. While materialism is a prominent view, it faces challenges. Some argue that it struggles to account for the subjective nature of consciousness. How do physical processes give rise to our inner experiences, like the taste of chocolate or the feeling of love? This is a question known as the hard problem of consciousness. There are alternative views like dualism, which suggests that the mind and body are separate but interact. Dualists, unlike materialists, propose that mental phenomena can't be reduced to purely physical explanations. Conventional materialism is a philosophical view that asserts that the mind can be understood through physical processes and the brain. It relies on reductionism and the idea that mental phenomena can be explained by the interactions of physical matter. However, it does face challenges in explaining the subjective nature of consciousness, leading to the ongoing debates in the field of philosophy and neuroscience. One of the most significant challenges to conventional materialism is the hard problem of consciousness. This problem questions how and why physical processes in the brain give rise to subjective conscious experiences. In other words, even if we understand the brain's physical mechanisms, it doesn't explain why we have rich, first-person experiences of color, taste, and emotions. This philosophical puzzle remains a central concern in discussions about the nature of consciousness. Materialism often struggles to account for qualia, which are the subjective, individual, and often ineffable qualities of experiences. For example, the redness of an apple or the taste of chocolate is not merely about the physical properties of light or chemicals, but involves the personal and unique way each individual experiences them. Materialism has difficulty explaining how physical processes in the brain can give rise to these subjective aspects of perception and experience. Another challenge is the question of mental causation. If mental events are entirely determined by physical processes, as materialism suggests, it raises questions about the nature of free will and personal agency. Some argue that this view may lead to a deterministic perspective, where individuals have no real choice in their actions. Critics of materialism argue that it may oversimplify complex systems by overlooking emergent properties. Emergence refers to the idea that complex systems can exhibit properties and behaviors that cannot be entirely predicted or reduced to their individual parts. Consciousness is often seen as an emergent property of the brain, meaning it may be more than the sum of its physical components. Materialism often focuses on quantitative aspects of the mind, such as the neural firing rates or biochemical processes. However, it can struggle to address the qualitative aspects of experience, like the difference between the feeling of joy and sorrow. How these qualitative differences arise from physical processes remains a challenge. While materialism attempts to unify the mental and physical realms, there is still a gap in understanding how subjective experiences relate to the objective world of physics and chemistry. Bridging this explanatory gap is a persistent challenge for materialist theories of the mind. In response to these challenges, various alternative views have been proposed. Dualism suggests that the mind and the body are distinct entities, with mental phenomena being non-physical. This view attempts to address the hard problem of consciousness by positing a separate realm of the mind. Panpsychism proposes that consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe, present in all physical entities. This view seeks to explain how consciousness can emerge from the most basic building blocks of reality. Idealism posits that the physical world is the product of consciousness, suggesting that the mind is more fundamental than the physical world. This reverses the conventional materialist perspective. Conventional materialism faces challenges in explaining the subjective nature of consciousness, the emergence of qualitative experience, mental causation, and the gap between the mental and the physical realms. These challenges have led to the exploration of alternative philosophical perspectives that attempt to provide more comprehensive explanations of the mind. The ongoing debate in philosophy and neuroscience highlight the complexity of understanding the relationship between the mind and the brain. This exploration of conventional materialism, also known as physicalism, has taken us on a journey into the heart of the age-old quest to understand the nature of the mind. This philosophy posits that the mind, with its array of thoughts, emotions, and consciousness, finds its roots in the physical world, particularly within the intricate machinery of the brain. As we conclude this discussion, we find that conventional materialism offers a robust framework with some key principles. At the core of materialism lies reductionism, the belief that complex mental phenomena can be reduced to simpler physical components. It's an approach that seeks to decipher the workings of the mind by breaking them down into their fundamental physical constituents, from neurons and synapses to chemical reactions in the brain. Materialists assert that the brain is a physical epicenter of all mental activity. When certain parts of the brain are damaged or stimulated, it can lead to specific changes in cognitive and emotional functioning. This view aligns with the notion that mental processes can be entirely explained by the brain's physical activities. Conventional materialism argues that mental events are the result of physical causes and effects. Whether it's the release of neurotransmitters, electrical impulses, or biochemical interactions, materialists maintain that there's no need for non-physical explanations for mental phenomenon. While materialism provides a compelling framework, it's not without its challenges and philosophical debates. Philosopher David Chalmers posed the hard question of consciousness, which questions how and why physical processes in the brain give rise to our rich and subjective conscious experiences. Materialism, despite its strengths, grapples with providing a satisfactory answer to this profound question. Materialism struggles to account for qualia, the unique and ineffable qualities of our experiences. It often faces difficulty in explaining how physical processes translate into the subjective aspects of perception and emotions. The deterministic implications of materialism raise questions about personal agency and free will, as it suggests that mental events are determined entirely by physical causes. Critics argue that materialism may overlook emergent properties of complex systems, including consciousness. These properties can't entirely be predicted or reduced to their individual physical components. In response to these challenges, alternative views like dualism, panpsychism, and idealism have emerged, each offering a different perspective on the relationship between the mind and the physical world. As we conclude this exploration, we find that while conventional materialism provides a robust framework for understanding the mind, it continues to grapple with the profound questions related to consciousness and the nature of subjective experiences. The ongoing debates in philosophy and neuroscience remind us that the mind's inner workings remain one of the most captivating and enigmatic mysteries of our time, inviting further exploration and intellectual discourse. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you found this video informative and thought-provoking. This is the point where others tell you, if you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more content just like this. But we know that kind of thing is for losers. Don't be a loser. And as always, I value your feedback and ideas for future videos in the comments section below. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep embracing your inner nude, dude.